Hello, everyone. I'm Scarlett Roque, a digital health associate at Bayer G4A. On behalf of our team, we want to welcome everyone for joining us in our very first Pitch Club. We have created this event to give an online space for digital health startups to pitch their solutions, get valuable insights from our jury members, and get the exposure they need. With that said, I would like to welcome our first startup, Philip Peters from Acorai.
Thank you,
Hi,
Scarlett.
Philip. How are you doing today?
Very well. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. So, if you could please share your screen, you'll have 3 minutes to pitch, and I'll leave you to it.
All right. So, hi, everyone. My name is Philip Peters, and I am the co-founder and CEO of Acorai, where we are developing the world's first non-invasive intracardiac pressure monitoring device to help reduce heart failure rehospitalizations. So the problem today is around half of all heart failure patients will be rehospitalized within 6 months of being released from the hospital. Not only is this extraordinarily costly, but around 75% of these rehospitalizations may be preventable. The solution is to measure intracardiac pressure, or what's otherwise known as blood pressure inside the chambers of your heart. And this has been clinically demonstrated to help reduce rehospitalization rates by almost 30%. The problem, however, is that there are only invasive solutions available on the market today. So we have developed as the world's first non-invasive and self-administered intracardiac pressure monitoring device, which has been designed using a novel combination of 4 sensor technologies and AI, enabling a product that's both non-invasive and cost-efficient for broad-scale adoption. So as a heart failure patient, you would simply place our device on your chest in the morning for a few minutes, and then within a few seconds, both you and your cardiologist would receive information about your heart's health. Your cardiologist can then help you manage your condition by adjusting your medication and/or risk factors associated with your disease. There are really 2 main groups of competitors in the market today. On the one hand, we have the invasive sensor solutions, which have a tendency to be on the bulkier side of things and are too expensive for broad-scale adoption. The second group of competitors are the AI-based wearable companies that are able to predict hospitalization risk, but may lack the cardiac health insights that cardiologists need to effectively able to manage their heart failure patients. We estimate our total addressable market to be worth $7.4 billion in high-income countries alone. This is primarily based on existing insurance reimbursement codes in the US. We are in the remote monitoring market, which means that our market's growing at 18% per year. And to leverage that growth, we are targeting private cardiology clinics in the US as our go-to-market customer. Our core team today consists of 5 people, and we consider ourselves to be a strong technical founding team. And what we mean by that is that we have the technical know-how in-house to take this product to market. With that said, we are human, and there's a lot of knowledge that we lack, particularly in the more murk-woodier aspects of IP, clinical trials, and electrical engineering. But we also have a team of 10 cardiologists who are fantastic and have helped us develop our product, ensuring that we understand the needs of the healthcare system and the needs of the patients and the doctors, and that we create the product features that they actually want. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Philip, for a great start. Now I would like to introduce our jury members. We have Dominic Kennerson from the G4A team. We have Lisa Sunan from Manat and David Hall from Revolution. Thank you all for joining us. And let's start with some feedback and questions from Dom.
Hey, thank you for that, Scarlett. And Philip, thank you for the pitch. I thought it was really interesting. One of the questions that I have, I think, early on is about the AI component that you have. So is this kind of an out-of-the-box AI? Is it unique to kind of your company?
So all of our AI models are developed in-house, and they are completely unique and adapted to the data that we have. And one of our key aspects when developing our AI has been interpretability of features, so that we are able to trace what is driving the results of the AI, so what is causing the essentially the estimated intracardiac pressure, and then provide that data to the cardiologists if they want it, so that they can better understand where it's coming from.
Do I have another question, or do I only get one question, Scarlett?
You can ask another question, Dom.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that, Philip. I appreciate it. I mean, I guess as a follow-up question, maybe you can describe a little bit your AI interface. So I'm trying to understand. One of the topics that's been on my mind, there's actually a screening next week in Europe for this movie, Coded Bias. So it's essentially a movie, this documentary about how there is bias inherent in AI solutions. And when I think about the global cardiac market, or even the US market, there are definitely health disparities based on race or ethnicity or even zip. So I'm kind of trying to understand, where does your AI fit kind of, is it actually connected to someone's skin, or is it like, can you describe that interface a little?
I mean, we've put a lot of thought into exactly that, and it's to answer that question. One is that we're a static AI, so we are not an adaptive AI. So the data set that we train on will be the data set that goes for the rest of the AI's life, essentially. We are lucky to be in Sweden, where we have a very diverse demographic, which gives us exactly the opportunity to train on a very broad set of people, which ensures robustness across both racial aspects, but also across different disease areas. The heart's a very complicated thing, and there's a lot of different things that can go wrong with it. And then, of course, things like gender and just weight differences. You know, we have patients that weigh 50 kilos, and we have patients that weigh close to 150 kilos. So our focus has really been about creating robustness in those models across both different environments, but also different patient populations.
Thanks, Philip.
Thank you, Philip. Thank you, Dom, for your questions. Now, moving on, let's hear some thoughts from Lisa. Lisa, do you share insights, or do you have any questions for Philip?
I do. Philip, how much testing have you done on the device? How many patients and how many sites?
So we will be starting our main clinical trial now in June, which is 715 patients with two of the world's leading cardiology hospitals here in Sweden, where we'll be looking at essentially 715 patients undergoing a right heart catheterization, which we'll use as the gold standard when we're comparing our product to the gold standard. Before this, we have done 2 proof of concept studies on blood pressure data sets. We have analyzed our machine learning models on out of sample data sets that have nothing to do with what we do, just as a proof of concept. The issue, of course, in this industry is that we require quite a lot of data to properly validate our models, and that is really what this clinical trial, which will be starting in June, is all about, getting the final results.
And what is the business model you're thinking about?
That is a good question, and that is something that we seem to be changing our mind about every week. But we have we're very careful about the internal incentive structures that exist in hospitals and in different healthcare systems. And right now, and this may change next week, but we are looking at going after insurance companies in the US, particularly the insurance companies that have a connection to an ownership in hospitals, where the incentive of reducing hospitalization costs is, everyone's kind of on board on that goal. We are also exploring the kind of direct consumer route, where, particularly in the US, there is a willingness amongst the more affluent consumers to pay out of pocket for these types of solutions early on. So as an early go-to-market strategy, that's also on the cards for us.
Can I ask one more? How does this compare to Vital Connect?
Well, like I said, we are focusing on intracardiac pressure. So we are taking a pre-existing invasive playbook and making it non-invasive. It's a very simple idea that we're trying to do, but
Vital Connect is non-invasive as well.
Yeah, but so the intracardiac pressure is what we're all about, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what we found when we talked about to cardiologists. It's important for them to understand what's going on, and it helps them manage their patients better. And there's so much clinical data that indicates that this particular metric of mean pulmonary artery pressure is extraordinarily useful for cardiologists in helping them adjust their patient's medication dynamically.
Thank you.
So Philip, I'll go ahead and wrap it up. Thanks, Scarlett. Philip, I'll go ahead and wrap it up. Great presentation, really interesting comments. I have two quick questions. My first, I'm an investor in a company that does similar non-invasive brain analysis to determine things like traumatic brain injury events. And I'm curious how you think about building your company to be diagnostic of the event that says, like, either, yes or no, very binary, something has happened, or do you have a sufficient data set to be able to be more prescriptive around what has happened so that you give cardiologists a little bit more information? Because I think one is great for a lot of sort of triage. You come in, you have this daily that says you need to go to the doctor or you don't, versus you need to increase the steps that you take today or decrease your salt consumption. How do you think about sort of the extent of the diagnostic for the device?
For us, it's like one step at a time, but our long-term vision is to become kind of a full-fledged cardiovascular disease management and diagnostics system, right? We are exploring 2 new clinical trials that are looking at coronary artery disease, as well as atrial fibrillation, so that we're able to provide this holistic overview of the patient's heart. And then, of course, we have the ability to become an interactive product as well, where we can integrate the telehealth components that are becoming more and more common, right? So creating that dialogue between a particular expert for that particular disease with the patient.
Got it. And then my last quick basic question: is there any clinical fall off against a more invasive study? Like, are you as good as what's in vivo, or is it much better? Like, it's like you just get a broader population, so it's you're faster and less invasive versus something that's got to be done in a healthcare facility.
I think what's the key component to this type of treatment is that you're able to get the measurements every day. So it's about the cardiologist being able to see the trend of those pressures. So the absolute accuracy of the measurement itself may not be so important. For the purpose of our clinical trials and our pre-submission discussions with the FDA, it seems to be very important, but that's another issue. So again, it's about the trend. But then, like I said, we are adding these other cardiac components because there are several other cardiac risk factors that tend to correlate with heart failure. So we want to be able to monitor those in addition to intracardiac pressure. So in many ways, we're creating a superior product because we're able to offer those additional insights as well.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you all. Now we can welcome our next startup. We have Jessica Thurman and Monica Schmid from AthenaX.
Great, thanks. Good to be here. Okay, so everyone here knows someone who has or has had cancer. In 1999, my mom was diagnosed with inflammatory breast cancer. She came from a poor background, descended from the Waptanoyate Sioux tribe in South Dakota. As a result, she didn't know where to start with her treatment journey, and so she did nothing. My mom died less than a year later at the age of 39. The day my mom passed, she would have started her first dose on a clinical trial. And unfortunately, today, it is all too common for patients to still think that clinical trials are their last case scenario. The pandemic has shown a light on the fact that it has never been more important for us to focus on the equity of our drug development as well as the distribution of care. In 2018, the FDA published a report looking at 5,000 patients who were on oncology trials that led to approvals. Only 4% of them were Black and 4% Hispanic, even though these two groups account for over 30% of the US population. Similarly, women have been underrepresented in clinical trials, especially women of color, even though we know their mortality rates are significantly higher, especially in areas like breast cancer. Which brings us to AthenaX. We are a digital patient advocate that's been built to be an inclusive, connected clinical trial ecosystem for women with cancer. We provide actionable, evidence-based recommendations for how patients can improve their lives while also establishing a performance baseline to ensure that we're putting the right patients on clinical trials. The oncology landscape has never been more competitive with regards to eligibility, and we hope to be there for patients before, during, and after this process. My name is Jessica Thurmond, and I am the head of clinical development for AthenaX. I've spent over the last 10 years working in the healthcare industry and cancer care to bring novel drugs to market, improve patient outcomes, and innovate from the ground up using technology. I attended grad school at Vanderbilt University and executive education at MIT. Monica and I met while working at Clinipace, where we bonded over our similar patient-centric values. Monica, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jessica. I'm Monica Schmid, co-founder of AthenaX and head of commercial strategy. Over the last 7 years, I've been working in healthcare business intelligence and clinical partnerships in a graduate school of the London School of Economics MBA program. Before I started in the industry, my grandmother had a tumultuous battle with kidney cancer. Despite her access to care at a leading institution, she still lacked a source for real-time guidance on her treatment and behavioral recommendations, which has driven us to build a tool that our loved ones would have benefited from. The demand in innovation and investment in healthcare has been growing at a record rate, with the pandemic highlighting the need for improvements in our current system. Clinical studies are increasingly costly due to their complexities, spurring a surge in funding in clinical trial enablement technology, which has doubled over the last year. The future of research is patient-centric and decentralized. AthenaX optimizes studies by identifying the right patients early on while maintaining consistent study adherence and engagement. Our initial focus will be on biopharma companies initiating breast, ovarian, and uterine cancer studies, with an expansion into additional oncologic indications followed by gastrointestinal diseases. The current research model involves disparate systems addressing fragmented components of the patient experience. AthenaX aims to delight its patients, providing cognitive behavioral therapy powered by real-time biomarkers, along with epidemiological insight, which will engage patients throughout their treatment journey before, during, and after a clinical trial. Our comprehensive approach brings together disparate pieces of patient data to provide integrative care, combining clinical enablement technology, healthcare navigation, remote monitoring, and cognitive behavioral therapy. This will promote early detection, treatment, and superior outcomes, empowering patients to tell their own story. Thank you.
Thank you both for such a great pitch. Now we'll have the jury members join and we can get started with Lisa.
Hi, thank you for that presentation. I'm not entirely clear, aside from clinical trial matching, what services you actually provide. You're on mute.
Oh, you're on mute.
Everyone's favorite. So in terms of clinical trial matching is going to be a piece of it, but I think really the long-term goal for us to move into the early detection space. So there will be clinical trial matching, but there will also be remote monitoring of patients. So our goal is to offer this on a per license basis to biopharma companies, be able to modify it based off of the current protocol. So not only provide services to the patients to match them with the trials, also to follow them during the trial, but then to also be there for them after. I think one of the big problems that we've heard from patients time and time again is once a clinical trial is finished, they're just dropped, and then they really don't know what to do after that. So our goal is to create a constant ecosystem where patients can continue feeding into clinical trials, even if they don't know that that's potentially an option for them. We're trying to tap into, a market of people that typically would not live next to Vanderbilt or Stanford and wouldn't even know that clinical trials are a possibility.
Do you mean you're going to use the software to do early detection of cancer before they know?
Yeah, so one of the things that we're looking at trying to to do to expand is less in the space of diagnostics, but looking at the biometrics that we can track using wearable devices and the application. There have been some companies that have been, and actually University of Michigan is doing research currently looking at heart rate as an early indicator of recurrence and progression of disease. So being able to look at all of the different data in the next year or two, analyze those sets to be able to see if there are any trends that we see that could actually be used for looking at early progression or recurrence of disease or even possibly remission.
Can I ask one more? Do I have time for one quick one?
Sure.
What's your business model?
Sure. So the business model, it's based around selling into biopharma customers. So that means we're going to be selling on a per license basis to the companies that are running these studies. So right now, where you're noticing 769 studies planned to start over the next 2 years, and the indications that we're targeting at the beginning, and we're choosing those indications just because of the prevalence of breast cancer, but do plan to expand outside of those eventually.
Thank you.
Let's continue with David.
Thanks. Jessica, Monica, great job. Really, really interesting. And I salute you for focusing on underrepresented participants in clinical trials, because that does have a huge a huge impact on lives. I guess my question, kind of similar to Lisa's, is while I understand the business model, the rollout and the go-to-market is getting this app on people's phones. And obviously the pharma companies can be really good at that, but I've got 300 apps on my phone. What makes AthenaX the app that I'm going to go to more frequently and really post or engage with? How are you thinking about drawing people in and providing sort of the content and tools needed to really figure out some of the other issues that you guys are trying to solve?
Yeah, absolutely. So this will always be free to patients. So the rollout, we're working with advocacy groups, specifically nonprofits, to be able to offer this to their large networks. Another piece that we're looking at is partnering with urban and community clinics. If you look at the distribution of the number of oncologists in the United States, actually 76% of them are not at large academic centers. So we're trying to be able to provide this in a broad spectrum. Ultimately, I think the other thing we hear from a lot of oncologists is patients want to know what they can do to make their lives better. What can they do on a daily basis to give them the best shot at beating cancer? And a lot of times oncologists don't have the time or the resources to be able to provide them with that kind of constant feedback. So AthenaX will be able to do that and give them daily goals that are actionable to be able to make lifestyle improvements that also will hopefully keep them in remission, ideally, whenever they move to that stage, and hopefully keep cancer away for good. I think that's a big area of the holistic model of integrated cancer care that we see a lack of. It's not just the cancer that you need to be worried about. It's all of the other pieces of your life that you need to be able to manage as well.
Really quick, I also like the notion, and tell me to the extent that this is integrated into the product, the accountability wrapper that, did you drink enough water today? Did you go out for a short walk? Are those part of the features that not only boost engagement, but also I think have a direct association with outcomes?
Absolutely. Yeah. So there's a section on it that shows you all of your progress in different areas. Algorithmically, if you're neglecting one area, then we're probably going to suggest that as a goal for you. We can also have this information, automatically be fed back to the physicians in a palatable format as well, so that they can see kind of, the outliers or the broad spectrum of how the patients are doing. There's a lot of data that's out there, and oncologists often are just overwhelmed with the amount of information. So we're trying to make this a simple format. So we kind of say, think of Noom for cancer patients, because the need of cancer patients are completely different from the standard population. And we have adopted our system to work within, CTCAE criteria and things like that for adverse event reporting.
Thank you.
All right, Dom, I think we have time for one more question.
Okay. Well, my questions, I think, initially were kind of dovetailing with David's, but maybe I'll ask a slightly different question since can you kind of describe, you just kind of bounced off of, kind of the Noom for cancer. Can you maybe describe in a little bit more detail, like how you're very uniquely positioned? I understand some of what I've heard, but maybe if you could describe that a little more, double down on your USP.
Yeah, certainly. So, if you think about what the standard patient needs, if somebody's coming in to say Noom and they're saying, I need to lose weight, well, that's a pretty standard goal, and you can have kind of a larger recommendation. But if a cancer patient logs in one day and they say, for example, I have a rash, and we're able to look through, some of these records and say, okay, well, this patient just started pembrolizumab this week. And as a result, we know that a rash is a fairly common reaction to this. So we're able to use a chatbot feature to also triage anything from the patient to know what actually needs to be escalated versus, what is something that we can just manage in-house. So, and then after that, we can say, okay, we're going to check back with you tomorrow and see how your rash is doing and if anything has changed. And if it has gotten worse, that's where we can bring in a nurse navigator team to be able to provide that human connection to the patient without necessarily having to have unnecessary emergency room visits and things like that. We'll have elements of pain management, stress management, sleep tracking, heart rate detection, as well as monitoring your overall activity, hydration, nutrition, all of these elements that really can be very different on a per patient basis. One patient may need to lose weight while the other actually needs to gain weight, and they're not able to keep enough hydration in their body. And so those are all the types of things that we want to be able to track to really look at the overall patient experience.
All right, thank you. Now we can move on to the next startup. Thank you, Jessica and Monica. Coming up next, we'll have Elizabeth Adeshina from Wazima. Hi, Elizabeth. Are you having issues sharing your screen?
Yes, I am, apparently.
Okay, let's look for your presentation because I saw it just a few seconds ago.
Okay, can you see my screen?
There you go. Okay, I'll leave you to it.
Thank you. Thanks for this opportunity. It's really great to be here. By 2030, just 9 years from now, non-communicable diseases or NCDs have been projected to be the leading cause of death in sub-Saharan Africa. Wazima Health is focused on tackling this problem head on. Hi, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Adeshina. I'm the CEO, founder of Wazima Health. The ways that NCD patients are currently being managed across sub-Saharan Africa simply isn't working. The lack of continuity of care results in patients looking for alternative ways to manage their health, poor compliance, and ultimately a much higher death rate. Our solution makes continuous and integrated health for patients and healthcare ecosystem more convenient and efficient. We provide continuous wraparound care for the patient through access to easily accessible online waiting and meeting rooms, triage, follow-up, access to diagnostic testing, and various health support tools. Although smartphone ownership and internet penetration are generally increasing across sub-Saharan Africa, there's one doctor per 400,000 people. This is grossly inadequate. And sadly, because of the brain drain, this figure continues to increase. Our target stakeholders are pharmacies, doctors, hospitals, governments, health insurance providers. They drive our B2B and B2C business model through subscriptions, commissions, and payment for online consultations. Since launching in 2018, Wazima has impacted about 100,000 people with NCDs and their families by providing end-to-end care and ensuring that they're able to comply with doctors' instructions where applicable. We've reached the rural and the urban populations as well. We've, since pivoting in October last year, we continue to see steady growth, first of all, and we've now got over 12 healthcare facilities subscribed and growing. Governments have now come on board to partner with us and for us to provide services. And we have lots of interesting partnership opportunities coming through as well. This small but sort of really driven team comprises myself, Andrew, 6 full-time members of staff, a board of directors, and a board of advisors. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Let's get started with some questions from David.
Thanks. Hi, Elizabeth. Pleasure to meet you. Great presentation. I'm really, really interested in what you're doing. I guess my starting question is, a lot of the causes for sort of non-cancer NCDs are environmental and lifestyle. And I'm wondering to the degree to which your product looks to inform on those characteristics, diet, exercise, as a preventer of like even beginning to engage with the healthcare system, given the 1 for every 400,000. How are you thinking about engaging that as a preventative measure prior to sort of the measures after sort of diagnosis?
Great. Thanks so much for the question, David. Absolutely right. We've built into our platform something we call Wazima Tribe. So it's a community of healthcare professionals, individuals who, they can communicate, ask questions, get answers, advice, lifestyle advice, and so on. So within our platform, we've got Wazima Tribe, which addresses that issue.
And congrats on the rebrand. Wazima is much better than IDH Health. It was a really hard, it was a mouthful to say. So
it was, yes.
Smart on the rebrand.
Thank you.
Great. Let's continue with Lisa.
Hi, Elizabeth. That was great. Are you able to share anything about the business that exists? So you said you have served 100,000 lives. Was that paid or pilots, or what is the current?
Right. Some of it, because we've done sort of a beta testing from going live initially in 2018. Some of it was free, but a lot of it was paid. So after launching in October or so of 2018, we were, quite pleasantly got quite a few customers. So the corporate organization.
What is the sort of annual amount you get paid by a customer?
Per customer, it depends. So we're looking at the corporate customers, for instance, would take up, say they have 50 members of staff. They would easily have paid us about equivalent of about £6,000-7,000 equivalent.
Okay.
Because we sort of convert the monies. So the initial model was going after a lot of corporate clients who have the numbers. So we were servicing their staff.
And is that model of insurance and access to care typical in other countries of sub-Saharan Africa? I mean, that's, I hear it's totally different, of course. So I was wondering if you have to sell to government primarily in other countries.
Yeah. The question of health insurance is growing. The uptake across sub-Saharan Africa in general is really quite low. But increasingly, we've just signed up with one of the HMOs or health insurance providers as a full partner. So it means we become fully integrated with their packages in a similar way that you would have in, say, in the UK or in the US. But it's a slow process. It's happening eventually.
All right, Dom, can you share your feedback or questions?
Yeah, absolutely. My questions are in the direction of Lisa's. I'm also thinking about traction and a little bit about what you said around this connection between rural and urban. You know, I mean, for me, that's quite unique, I think, to see in healthcare. I think, as I said earlier, you know, the number one predictor, definitely for the Western world, is zip code for health status generally. So, I mean, what is kind of your secret sauce, or how do you marry that strategy between rural and urban kind of service delivery?
Yes. I would say Africa's very, sub-Saharan Africa, certainly Nigeria, where we've been active for a few years, is a very unique market. The personal touch is still very much a thing. So despite being a digital platform, we do employ the human touch. So those more rural areas, we send out a nurse, we send out healthcare professionals who can go and in a way be the other side of the device. So we use the human element, which is still very much a thing across sub-Saharan Africa.
So piggybacking on that point, so when I hear personal touch, a part of my mind thinks that means labor intensive. And normally when something is early and labor intensive, it normally suggests kind of a high burn rate. You know, so how do you kind of manage your resources, or how are you thinking about scaling your staff around this personal touch?
Right. Thank you for that question. So the fact that we have that personal touch simply means that we also believe in sort of a sustainable, impactful model. We believe in going into communities, training members of the community, and in some ways getting them involved to provide that service as well. So it doesn't become, you know, a drain on our resources per se. So we go into the community, we train members of the community, so there's ownership as well.
Trainer model.
Yeah, trainer, exactly.
Well, thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So we're now moving on to our fourth startup, and we can welcome Maria De Freitas and Alejandro Serrano from uMore.
Hello. Hi, I'm Maria, co-founder and CEO of uMore, where we're positioned to become the first line of defense, helping users screen, track, and better manage their individual mental health. It's estimated in the United Kingdom that 1 out of every 5 individuals struggles with some form of mental health condition every year. But with less than 13 psychologists per 100,000 population, it's estimated that up to 70% never get the care that they need. The mental health issue is not just physical, it's also economic, with a global impact in excess of $1 trillion. I want to introduce you to uMore, a digital health screening platform where we're combining psychometric surveys, machine learning, and digital phenotyping to offer users accessible and personalized mental health care. So how does it work, you ask? Well, users check in daily, and over time they can see how they progress. We also provide tailor-made insights based on their unique situation. So why now? With 500 million individuals underserviced, we believe the number's even higher, we've got a market in need. But better yet, the global SaaS behavioral market is expected to grow to $5 billion by 2027. So we've got a market in growth. The mental health space is hot. There are new players entering the market every day. Where we set ourselves apart is that we want to be excellent at screening and tracking. Our goal is to live where the doctor can't live by empowering users to figure out what's wrong. And if you know what's wrong, you can get the right treatment faster. We went live in mid-December, and we just surpassed 4,000 active users. Moreover, we're top 10 under stress tracking on the Google Play Store in the United Kingdom. But best of all, we're helping people. Our early data indicates an average bi-weekly score improvement of 10%. In terms of financials, we've got a hybrid model, and our next step is in Q2, we'll add additional screening tools where users can pay a small monthly fee to deep dive into their data. We're also cooking a pilot with large tech employer to help build our B2B model, and longer term, we wish to license our tech to healthcare and insurance providers. On this awesome mission, I'm joined by 3 brilliant co-founders. We've got previous exits under our belts and experience from companies such as Kareem, Uber, Microsoft, Sony, Arm, Leo Pharma, Lego, and our Chief Scientific Officer, who's here with us today, Alejandro, has even done TED Talks on the language of mental health. Together, we're focused on making mental health care accessible to all. We're raising after the summer $1.5 million, and that will give us runway until 2023. Thank you, and remember, everyone has the right to a healthy mind.
Thank you, Maria.
My pleasure.
Let's get started now with some feedback or questions from Dom.
Hi, Maria. Thank you for your presentation. Really crisp, really well outlined. I'm really curious. I mean, I think pretty much everyone around the world probably could use your app right about now. But I am curious what do you think the stickiness has been for you to have about, it sounds like almost 1,000 users per month. What's been kind of what's been drawing people to you?
So actually, it's really amazing. We thought that we were going to have a huge challenge onboarding them because we need them to do these psychometric surveys so we can validate their position before we can digitally phenotype them. And we have a 3-minute onboarding, which is terrible. I mean, people would say nobody's going to convert. We've got an 80% conversion rate. So people are really, what we thought was going to be our core user was a biohacker who likes to quantify if we were wrong. It's actually somebody in a stage that it's called Help Me Now. I can't afford a psychologist. That's extremely expensive. My insurance plan doesn't cover my psychologist. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but in Europe, most healthcare government programs only cover suicide. So average people can't access care because it's a privilege. It's only for the few. So what we found, it was more people in I need help now. And this is a tool that helps me sanity check my mind. We're not a meditation or a telemedicine platform. We really just want to be excellent at helping people figure out their kind of headspace right now.
So when I hear Help Me Now, there's an alarm that goes off in my head around risk, and I think that's kind of one of the challenges for health apps, because everyone is thinking, I think especially from a litigious place like the United States, right? So if someone is using your app, they commit suicide, what happens? How are you liable? So how do you kind of manage that risk around what you do, or knowing that your core kind of current customer needs help right now?
So I'm going to let Alejandro answer that one because he's our Chief Scientific Officer.
Yeah, definitely. Really good question, Dom. It's something that we take very seriously in uMore. And thankfully, because we use psychometric measures to baseline the stress for our users, amongst other psychometric variables, it's conducive to be able to screen them for these more severe states of mental health challenges. So, for example, with a perceived stress scale, we have a breakdown of scores that are either low, moderate, or high levels of stress. And immediately, the first thing that we do once we see that someone is in a high level of stress is we push them to a screen that puts them in contact with a emergency helpline number relevant to the healthcare sort of system in which they live close, because we're able to use GPS location to understand where our users are. And then also we push them to a charity as well, because we understand not everyone is going to be able to get access just through healthcare means alone. So we give them options to be able to make sure that the support is there if outside the app. We do also make it very clear at the beginning of the onboarding process that this is not here to necessarily be therapeutic. This is a process that is here to support your mental health and is by no means a replacement by any therapist. So we do both ends. On the preventative side, we try to make these indications clear from the very beginning. And then on the protective side, even if we screen for a high level of stress or any other mental health constructs, we make sure that the guardrails are there in place for people to be able to hold on to and get the help that they need.
Thanks.
I'll go next, if that's okay.
Sure, please.
Maria, Alejandro, really interesting. I guess my wife is a psychologist, so I know this approach to mental health is so critical. I guess I have two quick questions. The first is, you guys seem to be part of the triage, the self-identification of like, I need mental health services. That's a lot different. And I saw in your model there was a subscription plan. What's the business model? Do you want people to self-identify and say, I need help now, I need help generally because I'm feeling depressed, and then you guys provide the service to help them work through? Or are you lead generation for other sort of digital psychological tools to help them sort of along the way? If it's the latter, I didn't understand sort of the 6-month, 9-month extended business model, the subscription piece of the business model.
So I'll talk a little bit about the economics. So our subscription model is only for, so longer term, we want to be a B2B play. We actually want to license our tech to insurance providers, even healthcare providers for clinical trials, because we know mental health monitoring is one of the biggest factors. Oh, and to give you some background on myself, I used to be the growth lead for Leo Pharma's Innovation Lab. So we were out of Copenhagen and we worked a lot with digital health and did skin trackers. So the early stage is just to give us a really rich data set. So actually most of the players in the space, they're only going B2B. We initially launched our app in the UAE, which is a super diverse population, English speaking, who is usually isolated because a lot of the individuals come here to work alone. And then we moved into the UK. So our goal was we start with consumers so we can build a really robust AI that caters for diversity and caters for multiple touch points, but longer term, we want to be in B2B. So our pricing model is to reflect our early stage and to a more mature model, but we suspect our revenue is going to come from B2B because the consumer plays, if you look at the Calm pricing model and even their revenues, it's you need to be generating so much volume to be able to accomplish that. Yeah. Like your burn is just atrocious. I've done consumer plays at a big volume and I'm conscious of that.
Well, let me. You mentioned the AI, and I'm also curious in particularly in mental health issues. Patients lie, and there are underlying factors where I might radio dial a button that says I'm feeling okay, but my text or other factors might contribute to say that I'm going through some type of mental health crisis. Is your platform adaptable to be able to suss out sort of the reality testing differential between what I intend to say in like text and my free association words versus like the buttons that I select?
Alejandro,
it's an interesting question, David, because at large it's a research question we have within the field, right? Like how are we able to detect the biases in surveys and replace those biases from more passive means of data collection, and where the limits are in data collection, how can we rely on surveys instead? So it is a challenge, but the belief that we have is that we position ourselves to also be at the forefront of trying to solve problems within this challenge. So the current use of psychometrics is very much there to be able to baseline the screening procedures, because currently within the field, it is the most efficient way of doing that, bar a psychological assessment from a psychiatrist. But we are unable to get a psychiatrist for every single new user that comes through. So for us, it's a very good start. The idea is that we are going to build off of these scores once we have this data per user. For what their stress or their anxiety or depression levels are like, we can use these digital phenotyping means to be able to then correlate them with one another and better understand how they interact. And then from there, we need to combine qualitative means as well to be able to actually check in to see if their reflection of their score is something which they believe to be accurate and representative of their case. And then throughout this, we're going to be able to disentangle, where potential biases lie from the psychometric measures, and where within our model we can rely more so on digital phenotyping means. But this is something, very much a challenge that we're facing along with the rest of the field, that we're prioritizing to solve.
Great, thank you.
Okay, I think Lisa is next.
Okay. So there are something like 700 behavioral health apps in the United States. Not
okay,
all of
great.
them.
And finally, Lisa.
Yeah. So
20,000 to be specific on the App Store. 20,000 to be specific on the App Store.
Oh, all right. So 20,000. 700 is bad enough. Why does the world need another one?
Of the 20,000, there have been many studies that have looked through a systematic review of how many of them are genuinely based off of evidence, and only 2% are. So immediately when we think of the competitive landscape,
that's still, a lot.
It is definitely still a lot. With that number alone, when we look at the competitive landscape, we think to rule out those 98%. But of those 2%, the few of them that do stress tracking have gone immediately into the B2B or the patient diagnostic space. And that's where they have operated within. As Maria has mentioned through the presentation, our first step was to go directly to consumers and to offer these tracking means to a population that may not clinically be diagnosed, but of course, mental health lies within a continuum, still experience mental health challenges. And we don't actually think that this was really possible before the onset of COVID-19, because we had two other apps, Mindstrong and also Ginger, that tried this but went immediately into healthcare settings and for businesses, and they weren't able to collect the same sort of user data that we are. And we see this as a competitive advantage because the learning engine that we're able to build is one that is more representative of the population at large than just these specific samples that they have been focusing on. So in terms of why we stand out in comparison to the rest is because we have thankfully been able to launch this project at a very sensitive time where the market has been open and individuals have been open to be willing to want to understand about their mental health, track it over time, visualize those changes. And that data is going to allow us to hopefully be ahead of the game for many of these other apps when it comes to having this powerful learning engine that we can use.
I'm not sure I agree with you that the consumer market is a good one for this, the long term, but we'll just put that aside for a minute. The protocol
I think what Alejandro meant to say is that they moved into the telemedicine space. Where we want to stay is in the individual tracking space and be very, very good at our scoring. So we want to be extremely focused on tech as opposed to heavily operational with physicians.
So you're going to sell then to other mental health organizations?
That would be the idea, yes. Mental health and possibly many other verticals as well.
And the protocol you're using, how has it been validated to be accurate?
So the psychometric measures that we use, all of them have been sort of clinically validated, reviewed, psychometrically assessed. We're not necessarily reinventing the wheel on any of these. We're just taking the existing measures that are used within healthcare and research and applying them for users of the app. Then the process of recommendations that we feed back are also all evidence-based. We make sure that we log for every single recommendation that we put onto the app, where within the research, where within the literature it was derived from. So there's nothing that we put out into the app that hasn't formed part of a research basis. And internally as a team, our philosophy is to make sure that we actually log off of every decision that we make, why is it based off the science? And that helps us remain aligned to make sure that the basis of the app has indeed been validated. The next step for us would then be to go about and conduct a pilot study and also a randomized control trial. And we've already started making moves on this. We have a pilot study lined up with a tech employer from Denmark. And after that pilot, then the next step is to move into these clinical trials.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Alejandro. Now moving on to our last startup, we have Alejandro Faragli and Sandra Rossi from BOCAhealth.
Hello, thank you so much. Hello to everybody. Scarlett, tell me when can I start, please? Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you. So you can start and I'm on the screen.
The COVID-19 hit Italy tremendously. Not only my country, but also my family. This is my father. 10 years ago, he was diagnosed with chronic heart failure and chronic kidney disease. If patients like him are not careful, water can accumulate in their lungs and they may risk to end up in the hospital. This is called pulmonary edema, and in chronic heart failure and chronic kidney disease patients, it is the main cause of death. It is February 2020, and the COVID-19 pandemic explodes. For chronic ill patients, this means a 6 times higher risk of death. This is what happened to my father. With an easy diagnostic solution to monitor body fluids at home, pulmonary edema and the risk of death could have been prevented. This is the reason why in Berlin I founded BOCAhealth, the fluid management company. Our vision is to utilize optimal body fluids management for chronic ill patients to improve quality of life and dramatically reduce mortality. I have a great team of experts to support me. BOCAhealth is the portable body fluids manager. It can diagnose body fluids problems, it can monitor them, it can predict them. It is composed by a portable device with wearable electrodes and a smartphone app. Thanks to our AI algorithm, patients and doctors can now actively manage the disease. In a clinical setting, doctors have multiple accurate diagnostic tools to determine the hydration status. In home care, patients have no reliable solutions to support them. Jens Spahn, the German Minister of Health, has recognized the importance of telemedicine, and thanks to the DVG and DIGA, BOCAhealth fits now perfectly as a digital reimbursed service for home monitoring of chronic ill patients. The total available market is represented by 119 million patients globally, 10 million in Europe, and first targets market are for us Germany and Italy, where we aim to reach 270,000 patients within 6 years. Our go-to-market strategy is to close a strong partnership with companies from pharma and medtech. In year 6, after commercialization, we expect to reach a total business volume of almost 1.2 billion and close to 700 million revenue for BOCAhealth in Italy and Germany only. We are currently finalizing the product to obtain the CE certification. We are looking for a strong strategic partnership within pharma or medtech and enter the market in the second half of 2022. To be able to reach our goal, we need a seed investment of up to 3 million euro. Our vision is to use optimal body fluids management to dramatically reduce mortality. Help us to achieve it. It may help also your families.
Want me to go? I can go first, if that's okay.
Thank you, Alessandro. Go ahead.
Thanks. Hey, great job, Alessandro. Really, really interesting product that you're building. I guess my quick question to you is around your go-to-market. In your go-to-market, you suggested you want to either partner with a device company or a pharma company. And I'm wondering, if you had to choose, which one would you prefer to start with? Because it seems like they're two very different, you know, like the pharma would likely be through some type of clinical trial on the efficacy of a drug and measuring sort of that outcome layer, versus the device, which seems like it might have a slightly higher standard to be, you know, to engage in partnership. And I'm curious, if you could pick, which one would you want to pick first and why?
Shall I reply, Sandro?
It's an easy one. It's pharma by far.
And why? Why? Did I get it right?
Yeah, it's absolutely. Let's say pharma is looking to integrate, going kind of following this beyond the pill approach, and we would be an excellent addition to this because we allow kind of to be not a direct companion diagnostic, but we support the treatment of the patient and the continuous monitoring of the patient. And so we would really go hand in hand with the treatment. And therefore, I think for pharma, the value is much higher than for medtech or a home care provider.
Got it. And I looked at the device online, and it seems to sort of work for, you know, non-ambulatory and ambulatory patients. Does it need to connect through some kind of IV system, or is it something where a patient can engage without being sort of, yeah, I'm going to use non-medical terms because I'm not a healthcare guy, but like I can just inject fluid into the device without necessarily having it be intravenously or through a catheter or something?
No, it is a non-invasive measurement with electrodes. Okay, so the measurement is performed non-invasive. The biggest innovation lies not more not just on the device, but actually on the interaction that we want to build, that we already built with our application, but on top will be built on the whole, let's say, management of the information that we get from the patient. So I'm talking as a doctor, when I release a patient, when I discharge a patient, the patient goes home, I don't know many times how is his hydration status. And hydration status means the compensation events if it is untreated. And so the measurement itself that is done with the device is one component. And then there's another component related to the whole information that the patient can insert inside the application. Talking about clinical status, talking about a specific anamnesis and questionnaire, which is, let's say, engaging the patient in the whole journey. So on one side, yes, there is a device, which is a non-invasive measurement, utilizing in this moment bioimpedance analysis. We are also exploring other technologies, but in this moment, it is bioimpedance analysis, already validated as a technique, already validated against, let's say, the gold standard non-invasive measurement, that is, for example, BCM from Fresenius. On top, there is the application, which is something in this field completely new.
Great, thank you.
My turn, I think, right? So why is your product better than Acorai's? They will tell you that pressure is a better measure, and you will say yours is a better measure. Why are you right?
I mean, we are talking about two different parameters. In the best world, we have one device that measures volume and pressure. I'm actually, by the way, specialized in this field of heart failure, in which you need always to take into account the patients have either too high or too low blood pressure, or either too much volume or too low volume. So finding a balance, it's always hard. The concept is that it's also a different type of patient, I think. So on one side, if you want to get for, let's say, primary prevention, you want to measure your blood pressure, it's fine. But here we are talking about seriously sick patients. They need to, let's say, be treated until the end of their life because they receive a diagnosis. And so it is secondary prevention. And in that sense, yeah, blood pressure is important. Most of the patients have a blood pressure already controlled by medication, while instead the congestion, the fluids they have in the body is the reason why they go to the hospital generally.
And did I hear you right that you thought you'd get to $700 million in revenue in 5 years?
Sandro, this is your turn.
Yes, that's what in Italy and Germany. And the reason is we aim to be reimbursed, and the patient will measure the parameter on a daily basis, and we have a reimbursement for the device and for the software. And we generate business for our strategic partner and the doctors that do remote monitoring. So the 700 million is based on the transfer price that comes to us. We have a list price for the product. We shoot for 1,500 euro and €5 reimbursement for each measurement.
I've not seen one single digital health company get to 700 million in revenue yet, so I'll be rooting for you.
That's let's say now Germany with DIGA and the reimbursement that they are putting in place, it really helps going into that direction. That's why also we want to focus on our two core markets. We sit in Berlin and our genes are in Italy, and so we focus on those two markets first. And the numbers, chronic ill patients are with CKD and CHF are really huge.
Thank you.
I have maybe 2 points. I want to go back to David's point around who your ideal customer is. I would kind of challenge you a bit around pharma, mostly because normally the validation that you have to actually work with a pharmaceutical company is extremely high. And, you know, so normally to reach that level of validation, you have to do a lot of science on your own, right? and you have to really kind of prove your product. And that's challenging, I think, for a lot of early companies. The second point, which I think is also related to kind of Lisa's observation and something that David said, I think, David mentioned that he looked up your product on the website, and then Lisa mentioned that this number around your 700 million total addressable market. To me, what they're both really kind of saying is that what was very memorable about your pitch were some of these big numbers, the pathway that you kind of saw to scale. What wasn't as memorable for me was the actual product, and I actually had to go online also to actually look at it and see what it does. And so, I mean, maybe your presentation, I think, your pitch could be a little bit more balanced to talk about the product, maybe in even a different way. I mean, I think the story is compelling, but, I think in 3 minutes to kind of lose track of the actual product. And I think both other, the other jury members recognize that in their own way. I think that's a bit of a challenge.
Dominic, thank you for your question. I really appreciate it, because it's something that I'm happy to reply. The product per se in this moment is for us a proof of concept that the device works, that we do measurement, and we will also certify the product as a CE mark. The concept that I want to underline, however, it's mostly our vision, which is actually change the way this parameter is measured. This means that we want to move out of there with the big R&D work to actually have something that could potentially also in the short future will look differently, in the sense there will be something even more integrated, even more miniaturized, and in which the biggest role will be played by the software. Now, just give you a small thing, could be even something integrated inside the beds of the patient at home. They do a measurement once per day. I mean, it's something that in this moment, the hardware is for us something that can be modeled. So we didn't want to stress too much on the product, while more on the possibilities that the product can actually give, given by a huge need. Then concerning the first question, I mean, studies and clinical studies, research, yes, absolutely. Hard endpoints. If we talk about reducing mortality, I'm happy with that. Otherwise, no. That's our bread. I mean, I'm sitting here in Charité Virchow Clinicum doing that since almost 4 years now, and that's what we're up to.
Dominic, let me add also one element. The parameter that we're measuring is hydration status, and today hydration status is measured with bioimpedance. So at the moment, it's not rocket science. We have cutting-edge technology, but bioimpedance itself is not really a sexy technology. So what we are doing is we are taking a standard technology, miniaturizing it, digitalizing it, and adding artificial intelligence. One big effort of what we want to do is to elevate the hydration status parameter to be the next blood pressure measurement, to bring it really to a routine use, because now we are able to measure it remotely, we are able to measure it at home. And that was the missing link today for such a valuable parameter. And that's why we're not focusing that much on the product itself, but hydration status is the journey that we want to take.
Thank you, Sandro.
And we have two
active
medical doctors on the team, a nephrologist that is in Italy in the hospital, and Alessandro as cardiologist at Charité.
No questions from my side, Scarlett. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you all for joining us. You guys were the last startup of today, so I just want to thank everyone who attended, as well as all the participating startups, and of course, our jury members. Finally, to wrap things up, I just want to let the audience know that the applications for G4A's partnerships program are now open. I'll leave you with a short video about the 2 tracks from our program, Make sure to check out this year's challenges on our website, G4A.health, listed at the end of the video, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Thank you again, and have a great weekend.